Learning U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff is back in Russia meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin right now. ABC's Patrick Reevell has more on all of that. So, Patrick, what's the latest on this meeting between Witkoff and Putin?
Hi, Dan. Yeah, just literally in the last few minutes, we've seen video come out showing President Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff meeting with Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg. The video showing the two men shaking hands and smiling. And this obviously follows the release of the former ballerina, Ksenia Karelina, last night, who is now back in the United States. This is the third time that Witkoff has actually visited Russia since President Trump took office. He's already, by his account, spent many hours speaking with President Putin during those trips in an effort to try and negotiate and begin negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. So far, though, we have not seen much success for that, because despite those efforts by the Trump administration, the war obviously continues, and we've actually seen so far from accepting a possible ceasefire. Russia instead has intensified its strikes on Ukrainian cities, but also even its offensive operations. So the question is today, if nothing comes out of these talks, will President Trump believe he has to start putting more pressure on Russia? Already we've heard from the Kremlin saying they don't expect any real breakthroughs from these talks today, Diane.
Patrick, President Trump is calling out Russia in a post on social media saying, quote, "Russia has to get moving. Too many people are dying, thousands a week in a terrible and senseless war, a war that should never have happened and wouldn't have happened if I were president." What do you make of that? And what's the latest on the fighting right now?
Hi, Dan. Yeah, I think it's an interesting comment from President Trump, clearly trying to signal to Russia that his patience is wearing thin, and basically signaling that there could be consequences if Russia continues just to intensify its attacks on Ukraine. We've heard from President Trump just a couple of weeks ago saying that he is considering imposing tariffs of up to 25% on Russian oil exports if Russia doesn't go for a ceasefire in the coming weeks. We know that is perhaps one of the reasons why Russia was one of the very few countries that was spared the tariffs imposed by President Trump over the past 2 weeks. But I think the problem right now is that Russia seems to feel that it can wait out the US because it feels that Ukraine's main backer, the United States, is now turning away from Kyiv. And one more important thing to mention is that taking place in Germany today is a meeting of European and other Western allies on how to support Ukraine, including discussions of how a potential European force could be formed to try and support any ceasefire. But I think there are still grave doubts about how feasible that could be, Diane.
Patrick Reevell, thank you.